If you have not started taking advantage of the free streaming service Tubi, then give me a few minutes to explain why you should use it, and I'll also tell you about 18 of the absolute best movies currently included with Tubi. That's right, Tubi is completely free. It's likely available on whatever device you use to watch movies. You don't even have to give them your email or create an account to start watching movies for free on Tubi. And I'm telling you, I've got 18 movies that rival anything available on Netflix right now. This video is sponsored by Rocket Money, but I'll tell you more about them later in the video. Right now, I want to tell you about my number 18 pick, which is a lesser known Joseph Gordon-Levitt action movie titled Premium Rush. Now, in this movie, he plays a bicycle messenger in Manhattan and gets caught up in a plot he wants nothing to do with. Michael Shannon actually plays a pretty fantastic bad guy in this movie, per usual, and Gordon-Levitt's really good here too. But this movie is kind of a by-the-book, PG-13 action thriller. However, it does have some really great bike riding in it. It's not mind-blowing, it's not overly violent, it's kind of right down the middle, which is why it's my number 18 pick, but still, a lesser-known movie that again rivals a lot of what is on Netflix right now. They've also got Cold Pursuit with Liam Neeson. This falls into the category of action movies he's been doing for the last 20 years or so, but this one stood out to me. This is actually a remake of a Scandinavian flick titled In Order of Disappearance. And while that movie had a little bit more of a quirky vibe than Cold Pursuit is actually a pretty faithful adaptation, and it's got some really badass moments in it for Liam Neeson that are not just silly action movie tropes. It's actually a pretty cool revenge flick, and it does have some of those quirky moments that the original had. I do prefer the original to this one, but as it stands, this is still a pretty decent American remake. One of the more underrated movies that Mark Wahlberg has done in the last decade, or let's say 11 years, is Contraband. Now, I know this one did fairly well in the theaters when it was released, but for a rated R action movie, this one hits pretty hard. Wahlberg does a fair amount of PG-13 action movies, and Contraband is very different from any of those. It's actually more of a crime movie. It's got some over-the-top elements, but Ben Foster is fantastic in this movie. Giovanni Ribisi plays a really great bad guy in this, and you get to see smuggling sort of in a realistic way. They just go a little bit over the top, but portions of this movie are incredibly fast-paced, and it's always entertaining, as well as being kind of a gritty crime flick as well. Now, for something that's a complete opposite of that, but is still packed with action, is actually one of Tom Cruise's most underrated movies, maybe ever, Night and Day.
Please, for your own safety, whatever happens, please stay in the booth. What are you talking about?
Oh, everybody get down. No one follows us, or I kill myself and then her.
Now, this movie is kind of a romantic comedy with Cameron Diaz. However, it is packed to the gills with Tom Cruise level stunts. Now, he has really upped his stunt game over the past few years with the Mission Impossible movies. They keep getting bigger and better, but Night and Day still has a lot of the same type of stunt work, but it's done for comedy effects in most cases, and you get kind of a fun chemistry with him and Cameron Diaz. You may remember her killing him in Vanilla Sky. Well, it's cool to see them have fun together in this movie. This is a great date night movie because it's really got something for everyone. You've got the rom-com stuff that I promise you is not too cheesy, and again, top tier action stunts with Tom Cruise that are kind of done in this fun spy type thing. It's fun stuff, again, for a date night movie. Another really fun one that I think was just terribly underrated when it came out in theaters 13 years ago now is The A-Team. Now, I never watched the A-Team show. It just wasn't on in syndication in South Mississippi when I was growing up, even though I knew about it and wanted to watch it. However, this movie is directed by Joe Carnahan, who had previously done Smokin' Aces, another just wild, over-the-top action movie. And as far as PG-13 over-the-top action movies go, The A-Team is one of my favorites. It's silly, it's cheesy, but the action never fails to be completely entertaining. The characters are really well fleshed out. You got Liam Neeson again, Bradley Cooper's particularly good in this. Jessica Biel's a smoke show as usual, and then Patrick Wilson plays a really great bad guy in this, and he's kind of silly and has fun with the character. He's not really sinister, and I loved that as well. Again, some fantastic stunts in this movie and just really dazzling action sequences. But one of the best action movie directors of all time has got to be Tony Scott, and one of his, in fact, his last movie before he died is Unstoppable. In this movie, Denzel Washington and Chris Pine have to stop a runaway train. That's the entire plot, and the movie is just really fantastic. Again, because it's in the hands of Tony Scott, a director who's done movies like the original Top Gun, Crimson Tide, Enemy of the State. I mean, he does fast-paced like no one else, making him the perfect director for this. I mean, being on the set of a Tony Scott movie sounds like an action movie in itself. Wild stuff. It really is a shame we lost Tony Scott so early, but my next pick on this list is another Denzel Washington action flick directed by Tony Scott that I think is just a scotch better than Unstoppable, Deja Vu. This has that same fast-paced, frenetic style, but this is more of a sci-fi movie. After a terrorist attack in New Orleans, Denzel Washington learns of this top-secret time travel machine. And the way time travel's handled in Deja Vu is quite different than any other time travel movie, but it's thinky the way you would want a time travel movie to be, and just, again, just incredibly fast-paced the way you want a Tony Scott movie to be. Now, hopefully this list of free movies on Tubi is a great way for you to save money, and hopefully today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is a great way to help you save money. That's because Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance platform designed to help you save more and spend less. In my line of work, I sign up for a bunch of streaming services, and Rocket Money helps me manage those subscriptions very easily with a flick of a switch. I can cancel, allowing me to save money on the ones I'm not using. Let's say if you only use your HBO Max subscription to watch Succession, well, as soon as you're done with the current season, you can cancel your HBO subscription through Rocket Money. You may remember cable and satellite used to make you sign up for a year or 2-year deals. These streaming services do not do that in most cases, and using Rocket Money this way is a fantastic way to save money and still get all the watching you want done. Rocket Money can help lower your bills simply by uploading a photo of your bill. Rocket Money can help you negotiate lower rates. You can set budgets that will automatically monitor your spending per category and send you friendly reminders when you're exceeding your budget. Rocket Money can also help you monitor your credit score, help you set up a smart savings account, and grow your net worth. Download Rocket Money and unlock even more features with premium. Just go to rocketmoney.com/flickconnection or click the link in the top of the video description down below. It's a great way to spend less and get an overall picture of what your spending habits are like, which is just an incredibly smart thing to do right now. But speaking of great stuff, let's move on with the rest of the movies on this list. Tom Cruise hits the list again, but this time in a sci-fi movie, Oblivion.
60 years ago, Earth was attacked. We won the war, but they destroyed half the planet. Everyone's been evacuated. Nothing human remains.
I honestly don't know why this movie was not a bigger hit when it was released. It is a visually stunning movie. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic Earth that just looks unlike any other post-apocalyptic world I've seen. Things aren't just overgrown. I mean, time has almost completely erased any traces of humanity. There's not much left. And Tom Cruise is really the only inhabitant of Earth until he's not. And the plot thickens, and there's some really great stuff here. Morgan Freeman's got a fantastic role in this movie. And yeah, it's packed with stunning action sequences, but all the sci-fi themes that they set up in Oblivion come full circle in a really fantastic way, making this a pretty thinky movie as well. It's not a Christopher Nolan flick, but it's pretty damn close. All right, next up we got one of David Fincher's more underrated movies, at least I think it is, Panic Room. If you've never seen it, the setup for this movie is incredibly simple. Jodie Foster and her daughter, who's actually played by a young Kristen Stewart, are moving into this big fancy new place in New York, and before they really get moved in at all, some bandits break in and they become trapped in a panic room. Now, for the simple setup that you've got there, Panic Room does a lot with it, a lot. Not only is it this great cat and mouse game that really just takes place in almost 2 rooms, but you get amazing performances. Obviously, Jodie Foster's great. Jared Leto is exceptional in this. Forrest Whitaker's particularly good. And Dwight Yoakam. You may not recognize him for most of the movie, but man, when he speaks up, he's really fantastic in this movie. And it's got this incredible dark, brooding nature. I mean, he's done so many good movies. Panic Room is far from one of my favorites, but it's still just a solid thriller flick. And then speaking of underrated movies, we've got one of Guy Ritchie's more underrated movies on this list, Revolver.
Get in the car.
Now, before talking about Revolver, I do want to point out that some of these movies will be gone from Tubi fairly soon. A lot of these really great movies, they tend to only keep for about a month or so, but I make new videos like this every single month. In fact, I make new videos like this every week on the different streaming services, so make sure you click that subscribe button and maybe even the bell icon if you want to get notified as soon as these videos release. But Revolver is a weird one. This does not take place in our reality, and the way Guy Ritchie directed it, you can tell pretty quickly. There's something off about the environment, but it looks beautiful. One of the things I really love about this movie is how fantastic Ray Liotta is. I mean, he often is, but he really hammers down on the character in this movie, and so does Jason Statham. I mean, Statham in particular is really acting a lot more than he typically does in his action movies. He tends to play this stone-faced character, and while he does do that in Revolver, you get a lot more layers from his character than you typically do, a lot more. The overall aesthetic is cool, but once you realize what's actually going on, sort of the mind game that this movie is playing with you, it's a really cool flick, especially in Guy Ritchie's filmography because it looks and feels a lot like some of his other gangster movies and is ultimately just a wildly different genre, wildly different concept than anything else he's done, and I personally love it for that. There's been a fair amount of action on this list, and my next pick is easily one of my favorite action comedies of all time. It has been since it came out, Pineapple Express.
Look at this. You see this? You see that? There's no hair under here, bro. Okay?
What's the significance of that?
It makes me aerodynamic when I fight.
Now, I know this is a stoner movie about a couple of potheads, but it escalates into such a wild, over-the-top action movie. It actually reminds me a lot of the Blues Brothers. Now, you may correlate all the dance numbers with Blues Brothers and wonder how I came up with that. When I think of the Blues Brothers, I think of that police chase towards the end of the movie. In fact, several police chases in that movie, and that's a lot of what you get with Pineapple Express, and it just doesn't stop. In fact, this movie's a great example of a movie that just steps on the gas as they get closer towards the end, and the humor's really funny in it too. I mean, even just the opening sequence with Bill Hader, I think is just absolutely genius.
I feel like a slice of butter melting on top of a big old pile of flapjacks. Yeah.
So even if you're not a pothead, and even if you don't like Seth Rogen, Pineapple Express just has a lot going for it. Now, I've said the word underrated and action a lot in this movie, but my next pick is easily one of the most underrated action movies from one of the most legendary action stars of all time, Bruce Willis in Last Man Standing.
I guess maybe you'll have to kill me. It'll hurt if I do.
Just like the Western A Fistful of Dollars, this is actually loosely based on Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. In fact, it's so similar, Kurosawa actually has a writing credit on this movie, but this is a Prohibition-era Western where Bruce Willis rolls into this ghost town and pits the Irish mob against the local Italian mob, making way for a bunch of really great shootouts and backstabbery. Christopher Walken plays a psycho in this movie, and he absolutely kills it. This is just sort of a forgotten Western that lives in this beautiful middle ground between being a full-blown Western and being a Prohibition-era gangster movie. It really does both very well at the same time. It's got some classic scenes in it if you've never seen it, or at least if it's been a while since you've seen it. I've watched it in the last couple of years and can tell you, you'll be surprised how well Last Man Standing holds up today. Now that movie was from 1996, but we're gonna go back even further to 1990 with a monster movie that, again, holds up incredibly well today, Tremors. Now, I know they made some other ones, and I kind of like Tremors 2, and Tremors 3 is even kind of silly, but the first one is a solid monster movie with amazing practical effects, most of which I'll say, still look amazing today and very convincing. You got classic lines with Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon. Reba McEntire is hilarious in this movie, and it's incredibly well paced. I mean, this is one I've watched countless times, and the movie moves. Once it gets started, there's plenty happening, and it never really drags. There's so many movies in this genre that are just not well done. In fact, most in this genre are pretty piss poor, and Tremors is easily one of the best monster movies of its kind. Now that we're in the top 5, we have got just some real premium movies, some of my absolute favorites. In fact, my next pick, my number 5 pick on this list, was easily my favorite movie of 2011, Drive. Personally, being a lifelong Martin Scorsese fan, seeing Drive in the movie theater was like seeing a modern-day version of Taxi Driver. It was the closest thing I've ever seen in a theater, and it's got this amazing glossy feel that just, I think, hit my generation just right. Feels a little bit like an 80s or 90s movie, yet it was fresh and new at the time, yet Ryan Gosling's kind of doing this quiet man thing like some of the tough guys from the 60s and 70s. It just had this beautiful mashup of so many things that I love, and then it told a great story fairly simply as well. The director Nicholas Winding Refn has done some movies I've recommended over the years and some movies I don't recommend. He tends to kind of get pretty weird with his movies, but he's much more restrained with Drive. I think that actually makes this movie work better than a lot of his other films, and is kind of the reason it has held up so well over a decade later, but honestly, that killer soundtrack didn't hurt either. But speaking of glossy new movies that just pop, Tubi has the entire John Wick trilogy currently available.
How good's your laundry?
No one's that good.
I thought not.
Well, now, I don't talk about these movies often because they're not often available on streaming services. You can watch them for free on Tubi right now. I recently rewatched all 3 plus John Wick 4 with a good pair of headphones, and my goodness, is that the way to watch those movies? Yes, they're over the top. Yes, the action doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but my goodness, these movies are dazzling stunt showcases. If you don't know, the director was a longtime stuntman, was actually Keanu Reeves' stunt double in The Matrix, and these movies are done for the love of stunts. They're over the top on purpose, there's neon lights everywhere on purpose, the soundtracks are killer, and it's just Keanu Reeves doing full-blown action for 2 hours plus. I mean, the John Wick 4 is nearly 3 hours, and it literally doesn't stop. I realize that's not for everybody, but when you know what goes into filming stuff like this, these movies are incredibly impressive and they never cease to be entertaining to me. If it's been a while since you've seen the entire trilogy, check it out on Tubi before it's gone, because again, they will be leaving soon. Now, another thing that makes John Wick so good is Keanu Reeves. Not only is he one of the most likable actors in movie history, he's also one of the best action movie stars in movie history. I mean, obviously there's The Matrix, but also Speed, and my next pick, Point Break. Released in 1991, Point Break has a fantastic blend of this 80s feel and early 90s feel. This was actually directed by Catherine Bigelow, who would go on to win an Academy Award for The Hurt Locker. She, for some reason, does masculine movies very well, Point Break being a fantastic example. There are some things in Point Break that seem a little cheesy today, but that's because they've been spoofed over and over again. When this movie came out, it was the coolest thing ever. Not only is Keanu Reeves great, but my goodness, Patrick Swayze in this movie is an absolute animal, and this is one of those movies that kind of helped build the legend that would become Patrick Swayze. I mean, that remake they did in 2015, it doesn't have so much as a spark of the magic of the original, just top-notch stuff that is often imitated but rarely replicated. And then another action movie from the 90s that falls into a very similar category and really launched one of the most incredible action movie director careers in movie history is Michael Bay's The Rock. Say what you will about Michael Bay movies, I agree, the PG-13 high CGI stuff has really gotten out of hand, but the man knows how to film action, and The Rock has got a hard R rating, very little CGI, at least almost no overt CGI, so very much like John Wick, you're getting a wild stunt showcase. All the action once they get into Alcatraz is unbelievable. This movie's got a great pace. It's an amazing character from Nicolas Cage. Sean Connery is really fantastic. What a great and appropriate action role for him to take so late in his career. Another one I've watched somewhat recently, and it just holds up unbelievably well. Now, it's worth noting they've got quite a few Quentin Tarantino movies on Tubi right now, like Death Proof. They've even got Planet Terror, directed by Rodriguez, that came out with Death Proof, but on this list, I put what I think is really my personal favorite Tarantino movie, Django Unchained. Now, I realize that may sound like blasphemy to some of you, but my goodness, the way this one was written. I love almost every single sequence in this. And a lot of the scenes don't run too long like a lot of other Tarantino movies. They're much quicker. If you go back and watch this movie, there are some long ones, especially towards the end, but he gets to the point a lot quicker than he used to, but it's still with sharp, snappy dialogue, and this movie's got so many clever little moments in it right from the very beginning. DiCaprio is an amazing villain in this movie. He was robbed for not even getting an Oscar nomination for this, which is so stupid. It's like they didn't want to give him one because he plays a slave owner, but like he's playing a bad guy and he does a great job at it. He deserved a nomination at the very least. It's killer stuff, and so did Samuel L. Jackson. My goodness, I mean, he has been amazing for years, and I would say his Tarantino roles are easily some of his best. But what he did in Django Unchained is so incredible. He's menacing.
One word of sass, they cuts out your tongue. They good at it too. You won't bleed out. Oh, they does that real good.
He's funny.
I miss you like I misses a rock in my shoe.
It's just a beautiful dance that he does and that this movie does. I absolutely love the aesthetic and the humor and the over-the-topness of Django. If it's been a while since you've seen it, I highly recommend revisiting while it's still on Tubi. It will be leaving soon, but that is the list. Thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. It is a great way to help you save money. Go check out that link in the description below. But I will keep making these episodes as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Tubi episode, and you will see me on the next one.